Lecture 10, putting it all together and creating a full communication package. So this is the last lecture of the class, and it really just wraps up everything that we've covered so far. So we're talking about like principles, all the different tools, and putting it all together to deliver a complete and polished communication package. So looking at our learning modules, the last couple objectives that we have: produce an integrated communication package using slides or PowerPoint and Canva, integrate branding, color, and typography across multiple formats, and creating visuals. So all of this is going to be what you're doing in the next assignment, and this lecture will kind of go over the high-level, big picture aspects of all of it. So what we've done so far, the big concepts have involved the visual purpose, right? The design principles. So we've looked at some core design principles and then also some accessibility principles. We've looked at the differences between PowerPoint and Google Slides and Canva and what they can all do and what they can't do. We've looked at having consistency across all the formats, and then also at giving and receiving critiques. So I've mentioned this communication package. What is a communication package? It's a cohesive set of visuals designed to deliver one message across multiple platforms. And so it might have a slide deck, a Canva graphic, supporting charts or infographics. When we're thinking about the real world, professional communication happens across multiple formats. And so you just want to kind of get used to being able to do that, create different things. Again, I've mentioned like in the place where it's done the best. So this is where your opportunity to try and have error and succeed comes into play. And you can start to decide which thing is done best in which tool. And it's going to be something that probably is going to come up again for you. So why does any of this matter? It really just reinforces your message. So we've talked about having that purpose and the goal with the audience in mind. It creates that coherence, so you have that clear tone, the clear structure. It just presents a really professional package. It makes everything appear a little bit more polished when they all actually look like they belong together. And so the message comes first. I've said this before. You are probably sick of hearing me say this now, but it is the most important piece, right? So what do you want your audience to do or to take away from your materials? Who is that audience? And where are they going to come across all of these things, right? So is it going to be in a formal classroom environment? Or is it going to be on their phone while they're scrolling through? Is it going to be on the side of a bus? So you need to think about that to ensure that the tools that you're selecting are really serving that message the best way that they can. So some examples here for choosing the right piece for each context. A slide deck is going to be good, obviously, for a presentation or for a step-by-step explanation, right? So you can have one slide go through each step. Things where there's a sequence, there's an overall structure, there's a beginning and there's an end. A Canva graphic would be better for social media, right? Or for creating a poster, an advertisement, something where you're going to be able to communicate information visually. Canva is great for. And then you can create charts or figures when you have maybe more concrete data. And so you can do that across these platforms. And a professional communication package will often include one or more of each of these. And so building that cohesion across the tools is about having slightly different things that all are the same, right? So there's maybe it's the color palette or the typography that's really bringing them together. Icons, logos, if you're working professionally, they are going to be repeated throughout all of these different environments. And then just the language that's used for the communication is going to be consistent as well. So you might have a really casual, relaxed style if you're trying to gear something toward a athletic audience. You might have something that's much more structured and rigid if it's maybe related to financial planning, right? So you need to understand the context, the audience, to create your tone. And so when you're going through the process of creating this, you've done a lot of this already in the class, but so it will begin with drafting your message, right? And then you can start to sketch out what you're going to do in each of your different formats. What do you need to be able to actually communicate that message? What are all the different pieces? And then what's going to be included in each of those? And so then you start drafting it out. You have your consistent design system, right? So you have your brand kit and you can use that in all of these different tools. And then you want to take that draft and bring it to somebody else. Get your feedback. Have intentional critiques, ideally from multiple people, right? So maybe somebody who understands your style really well, but then maybe somebody who doesn't, and see if it still lands the same way. And again, you want to make sure they understand your purpose and your audience so they can give feedback that is appropriate contextually. And then you take that feedback and you revise it. And you probably do that multiple times. And then eventually you'll get to a final version. And so you'll share that and we'll talk about how you share it. Probably you're going to export it into PDF or some sort of stable format. And so with this, just understand that is a constantly developing process. You're always going to be revising. If you ever stop revising, it means maybe you shouldn't be doing this work anymore, right? You should have that kind of growth mindset throughout. So if it's an assignment for a class, okay, there's an endpoint, but you take that feedback and you can understand how you would do it differently. And you're going to do it again in another assignment, right? So you're going to take the same skills, the same experience and apply it again. So maybe you're not working on that same presentation over and over, but you're doing another presentation in work. It will probably be more of a consistently revising the same things. So exporting what you've got. So you need to prepare anything that you create for actual real world use. So from your PowerPoint or your Google Slides where you have the slides that you're going to export, PDF is going to be great for stable viewing. So it's going to be something that you're going to share to people, maybe send it over email. If you're going to be presenting it or if you're expecting to make changes, exporting it as a PowerPoint file will be best. You can actually do that editing right in that. You can't edit as easily with a PhD or a PDF. And it'll also be an opportunity for you to check to make sure that your fonts are embedded. This is an instance where PDFs are preferable. Something that you've created in Canva, your images you want to export probably as a PNG. If you're going to be emailing them or putting them on a website or social media, the image file is going to be the best. If you're going to be printing, a PDF is a good option. You can also export as a PowerPoint file if you've created a presentation there. Exporting from Canva as a PowerPoint can be tricky. A lot of stuff will be lost in that transition. So once you have that open in PowerPoint, you still want to go through and do a really close edit to make sure everything's working as it should. Do a mock presentation of it to see. You can also export a slide deck from Canva as a PDF, and that way you'd be able to ensure that everything stays consistent. So that might be a better option. And the exporting process, you don't just save it and then be done. You save it and open it and look at it, right? Make sure everything is as you expected it to be. And so a lot of the problems that could come up are here. So this is what usually happens when you get to the end and you're rushing to be done. And then you have one of these come up and it's like, oh no. And you just get that like rush of stress at the end when you thought that you were almost there and now you have to go backward. And so you can have blurry images, especially when you're exporting to a different format. Images can get further distorted. So again, make sure that you're putting the image into your program in the highest possible quality, not copying and pasting it in. And then when you export, do that to the highest resolution. So when you're exporting from Canva, they will give you options about that. Same for when you're saving in PowerPoint. Missing fonts. If you export it as a PDF, that font will be embedded into it and it'll be stable. Off-center layouts. This is where like your grids and your guides would have been useful. So just make sure that you're using those from the beginning. If you didn't use them, go back and maybe use them to put everything back into the order that you wanted. Your colors. These are something you can check through some of the checkers that I've shared with you in the previous modules. Think about big picture, think about accessibility as you're making those color choices to begin with. And if you're simpler, it's going to be easier. If you create your own color to go with your brand kit, make sure you make a note of that so you can recreate it. And a lot of times when students are submitting work, they lose quality because of these sorts of issues. So just like the tool issues versus intentional issues or mistakes that they've actually made themselves, it comes down to just the way that these different pieces of technology work or don't work with us. So being aware of these sorts of things so you can kind of cut them off when they become problems and fix it really quick is important. And so you want to always do a final quality check just to make sure everything is as intended. A lot of these things that you're going to be creating are for an external audience. And so you don't want to present anything to an external audience without it being of the highest quality and really achieving the goals that you intended. So you want to make sure that the message is being communicated consistently. The colors and the fonts are consistent. Everything is actually readable. The files have appropriate names. You don't want to have crazy names or keep the default file name from a Canva template that you use and then send that off to somebody else. You want that file name to be intentional and you want it to be easy to navigate. It should make sense. You shouldn't be mentally taxing the audience. So, a final product should always have final polish. You should always expect to make edits at the end. That's just the nature of this sort of work. So, this is the last lecture for the course, and by this point, you've been able to analyze visual communication, you've practiced creating persuasive visual messages, you've decided and learned how to choose tools appropriately, you can maintain cohesion across different formats, and now you know how to export your polished and professional work. And so basically just keep going with all of that. This is something that you will only get better at with time and with practice and with applying all of this. A lot of this, I'm sure you've already done hundreds of times. Some of it will have been new to you, or there's different tools that you hadn't used before that you might be able to now. So just keep doing that, keep experimenting, work on building a portfolio so you can demonstrate your ability to do all of these things. You can definitely use templates, but do it with intention, do it wisely. Don't just choose something because it's pretty and not look through, right? A lot of times with templates, you see like the first slide and you don't see all of the other ones that they build. So don't commit to something based just on that first slide. Really do your due diligence to make sure it works. And then keep critiquing yourself and others. You only get better with getting that sort of feedback, especially when it kind of meets our expectations of being actionable. And so these tools are all great, but you don't need the really fancy tools to be able to communicate digitally, right? These help for sure most of the time. Sometimes they can make it harder, but so use them when they're appropriate. Don't use them when they're not. So hopefully all of that's going to be useful for you long term. I'm looking forward to seeing how you apply all this in your final project.